Dear colleagues, welcome to this memorial seminar, lunchtime seminar in memory of Ian Castle. We are doing this, this is the second time now. Last year we started this tradition. I hope this tradition will not be continued because and, it's not nice to keep on organizing memorial seminars. But we all know Ian Castle. Ian Castle has been a very prominent statistician, not only in Australia, but also in the Asia-Pacific region, and also in CES, and also in the global arena. And of course, we remember him when he made the interventions during the Statistical Commission with respect to ICP and with respect to development indicators. That's why we thought that it's appropriate to organize a memorial seminar with the theme of development indicator. And today's session will be videotaped, and we hope that this particular video show will be presented to the family of Ian Castle as a memorial memento. So now I'll give the floor to Brian, and Brian will take the proceeding forward. Thank you very much. Brian, please.
Well, thank you, Paul, and welcome to everyone to this memorial seminar for Ian Castles. I'll make a few introductory remarks, and then our three panel members, Enrico Giovannini, President of the National Institute of Statistics in Italy, Francesca Grum from the United Nations Statistical Division, and Eduardo Nunes, President of IBGE. I'm not going to try and announce in Portuguese the name, from Brazil, will be the three presenters, and they're going to discuss different areas of our international statistical work that continue to be greatly influenced by the earlier contributions made by Ian. At the end of the formal presentations, we would like to think there's going to be time for some lively discussion. But let me first just draw a short pen picture of Ian. Ian died in Canberra on the 2nd of August last year after a short illness, aged 75 years. He was still very intellectually active at the time of his death, and in fact I was quite shocked when I learned of Ian's death, because I'd spoken with him only a couple of weeks before when he attended the launch of at our ABS house in Canberra of our 2010 yearbook, and at that stage he was in fine spirits. As some of you may know, Ian not only excelled as a statistician, but prior to joining the statistical community, he had an outstanding career as a senior public servant in both public policy and public administration arms of the Australian government, and that was before he joined the ABS in 1986 as Australian Statistician, which was a role he continued in until his retirement in 1994. Under Ian's guidance, the statistical work at the ABS became much more professional, for it gave him the opportunity not only to influence the type of statistics that the ABS produced to support policy analysis, he could now influence the way statistics were presented to better support the needs of the user communities. Some of the analytical projects in which he provided much of the intellectual underpinning included studies of the distributional impact of taxes and government benefits on household incomes, what came to be known in Australia as the fiscal incidence studies, on international purchasing price parity studies, public sector productivity, and the treatment of housing costs in the CPI. And Ian also championed the development of more extensive commentary and analysis in ABS publications, with the Australian economic indicators being a very important beneficiary of his input. I think another enduring influence of Ian's period of stewardship at the ABS was the emphasis he placed, and he did this at every opportunity both inside and outside of the ABS, on the importance of independence, objectivity and integrity. Ian brought this passion for objectivity and integrity into his special blend of intellectual curiosity, thorough knowledge of past and present research practices both in Australia and overseas, the creative thought and the very elegant writing. He brought all this to his international work. Both during his period as Australian statistician as well as after his retirement, he had considerable influence on international statistics. He was president of the International Association of Official Statistics from 1991 to 1993 and was elected a member of the International Statistical Institute in 1994. Some of the areas of his significant international influence included his contributions to the balance of payments through the IMF Working Group on capital flows, the International Comparison Program, through work that he undertook for the OECD, and as Paul mentioned, improvements in the accuracy of the data in the Human Development Report through his interventions. Now, Ivan Fellegy, who was a colleague of Ian's through this period, former long-time Chief Statistician of Statistics Canada, at the time of Ian's death, expressed his opinion about Ian's approach to one matter Ian had pursued as follows, and this is a quote from Ivan. "What impressed me about Ian personally was his unshakable professionalism and integrity, which led him to champion truth, whatever the consequences, and his vision, which enabled him to identify and fight for global issues of major consequence. And I particularly remember the occasion when his criticism of the annual report of the United Nations Development Programme resulted in lasting change in their approach. The consequence of Ian's long-distance guidance was the establishment of a panel that vindicated Ian's insight and whose recommendations had to be accepted by the UNDP. Ian understood well the fact that among professionals there is no greater truth than the unvarnished evidence itself. The statistics and economics profession needs many people like Ian Castles, but unfortunately there are precious few of them." That was a quote from Ivan. Another former colleague of Ian's from the international statistical sphere was Len Cook, former Chief Statistician of New Zealand and of the United Kingdom. And Ian had this said about him by Len, and I quote, "He was someone who cared deeply about the place of official statistics in public life and had a special gift for pulling together the methodological, political, ethical, constitutional and historical dimensions of our work." Now finally and most recently, Ian's deliberations on climate change issues again saw him challenging the wisdom of the day. Essentially, Ian raised two major criticisms of the work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. First one was its presumption around the convergence in per capita income levels among developing and developed countries over the next 100 years. It was Ian's view that this was unrealistic. And by inference, of course, what he was suggested was the predicted growth rates needed in developing countries to achieve the convergence wouldn't be achieved, and hence the greenhouse gases that they would generate would not be as high as was being posited. His second criticism was that the economic modelling work underpinning the IPCC work was flawed because it used exchange rate adjusted GDP rather than PPP adjusted GDP to compare and aggregate across countries. And I think there's a familiar tune in that particular criticism that led originally to the OECD work. Interestingly, a subsequent workshop that was held at the OECD confirmed the validity of both of Ian's criticisms, but unfortunately this wasn't before Ian had been subjected to a lot of personal attacks and abuse for daring to challenge the scientific basis of the IPCC work. Now, earlier this week, many of us attended a seminar on the fundamental principles of official statistics, and I think you'll see from the presentations of the panel this afternoon that Ian embodied these principles in how he went about his work. In particular, and often at the risk of strident personal attacks, he gave full effect to Principle 4, commenting as he saw appropriate on the erroneous interpretation and misuse of statistics. His courage in this regard provides a wonderful example for us all. Ian's death notice said, "A great mind and a generous heart." Fitting words for someone whose legacy lives on in a lot of international statistical work, as we'll see through the presentations. So without any further delay, I'd like to ask Enrico Giovannini, President of the National Statistical Institute of Italy and the former Chief Statistician of the OECD, to provide us with the first presentation. Enrico.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I immediately have to say that when Brian asked me to do this presentation, I was a little bit surprised because I never had the opportunity to meet Jan Castles in person. I had some exchange of emails with him during the time when he criticized the IPCC calculations, and the seminar that you mentioned at the OECD actually was organized because I pushed the economics department to do that. So I'm pleased that that intervention was helpful in order to clarify that he was right and others were wrong. But then I accepted this role, trying to understand a little bit better the answer to a question that we as professionals always have in mind. How can I be influential in some way? How can I try to contribute to the evolution of this family of international statisticians? And how can I push for better statistics worldwide? When I joined the OECD in 2001, of course, as you can imagine, and I met Louis Kincannon, who was my predecessor at the time, and he gave me a sort of list of pending issues or hot issues that had to be addressed. One of the documents that I was forced immediately to read, of course, was Jan's report on OECD Eurostat PPP's project. And so I asked my colleagues, what's the story and what are we doing to try to solve or to address those issues? And of course, they gave me a long list of answers and good answers, I think. But I couldn't really evaluate by myself the importance of Castle's contribution until I joined the board of the ICP for the 2005 round, that I'm now chairing for the 2011 round. Because only at the time I had the opportunity to understand first how complicated is this issue and how you must know very well about all the technicalities in order to provide comments that can really make the methodology and the organization of this work improved. So just addressing this issue means that you must be very knowledgeable in statistics. If you look at the technical documents about PPPs, are one among the most complicated documents that you can even read in international statistics. So I immediately recognized that his contribution was very important, and I discussed with my colleagues at at World Bank, how can we together try to answer the question from Brian, how to celebrate Jan's work, trying to look at the recommendations and where do we stand now? This was the question that I asked my friends in the World Bank, just to evaluate all together how much we did and how much we are trying to do right now. For example, one of the recommendations that Castles made in his report was about the establishment of a governance framework for PPPs at global level. And in 2005, with the creation of the board of the ICP project, with the creation of the technical advisory group and so on, I think that we made a big step forward, which is now being refined through the discussions that are taking place for the 2011 round. Second, he suggested to OECD and, of course, to Eurostat as well, that other organizations had to be associated to this effort. And now we have a quite complex governance structure by which we have the big international organizations working together on that, but then we have the regional coordinators, and then we have countries, and then we have, and so on and so forth. It's just to say that while mid-90s we had mainly the OECD Eurostat PPP program, now we have an association of international organizations and national statistical offices working together. Then, of course, as I mentioned during my intervention this morning, ICP is today the most important global statistical exercise. And when I say global, I'm not just talking about the geographical coverage, but I'm just trying to say that is really the most coordinated and global effort that we are undertaking as an international community. Of course, a lot of problems come from the need to ensure comparability of this data, because the world is different. So Castles made several comments and suggestions on how to improve the comparability. And we have now, with the 2011 round, after having experimented in 2005 the so-called ring comparisons, using so-called ring countries in order to link different regions of the world, now we have a common global core list of items that all countries have to measure, plus other special lists for regions, and so on and so forth. This is just to say how much the ICP is trying to achieve in terms of comparability. And in fact, there is a lot of interest also from the private sector in order to try to use this data for research, because, as I said, this is a truly global effort. The fourth point that Castles made in his report was about funding. And here we have to recognize the role of the World Bank, especially. The World Bank not only hosted the 2005 round, but financed it very largely in order to cover the resource gap that was due to the fact that we didn't find many international organizations and regional banks ready to finance this project. Now the situation is better, although some gap is still remaining, but the challenge here, as we heard this morning, is that a lot of countries see these just as a burden and not as an opportunity. And this is why we need still now to mobilize resources and support at global and local levels for this kind of effort. So from this point of view, we need to do better, even if we did a lot. The quality of results. I think the 2005 round was recognized as a big jump compared to previous experiences, not only because so many countries participated in the program, but also because the Global Office indeed with the help of the technical advisory group, developed very much improved methodology. Of course, as statisticians, we know that this is a never-ending story. This is why we need to do more, and in particular, we need to allow researchers to replicate the results that the Global Office is able to produce. Therefore, we need to have more access to microdata. We need to have more people looking into this data to help us in improving quality. And then finally, again about the quality, Castle suggested to build a quality assurance framework for ICP. Do we have it? We could do better. Because for the 2005 round, we used the IMF data quality assessment framework, which has been developed mainly for classical survey-based data or for national purposes. As I said, we are talking about here really, truly global effort. So I think that in this area we can do better and more. Just to conclude this intervention, as I said, he has been really influential in building and improving this truly global effort on ICP. But as Brian also mentioned, he advocated very much the use of PPPs for international comparisons. And here, I think that we have to recognize the big step forward that the IMF has done over the last few years, using PPPs in order to calculate the quotas of different countries. Of course, it's a system that can be improved, but having the IMF now using PPPs for its own purposes, of course, change the perspective and really is pushing all countries to have the best possible quality data. So I think that with this short summary, I tried to highlight how a person can be influential and how this can be recognized not just by professionals, but also by international organizations. So I think that this kind of example should be followed by us and by many others, especially young statisticians who can learn a lot from people like Jan Castells. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Enrico. In the interest of time, I'll move straight on to our second presenter, which is Francesca Grun from the United Nations Statistical Division. So, Francesca.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to share with you an overview of the work undertaken by the UN Statistics Division to address the issue of data discrepancies between national and international data sets, particularly in the context of the MDGs indicators. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the role of Ian Castells in bringing the attention into the issue of data quality and data discrepancies between these two data sets, national and international. The issue of data discrepancies has been discussed in many sessions of the statistical commissions, and you probably remember that in 2006, the discussion of the Statistical Commission resulted in a resolution on the need to improve, to strengthen national statistical capacity that was also adopted by ECOSOC in the same year, in 2006. The major issues or concerns raised by countries at the Statistical Commission can be summarized or grouped into three major areas. Countries complain about the lack of consultation with national statistical offices, meaning that international agencies used to prepare to come up with their own estimates for selected indicators and countries and disseminate or publishing these estimates without a proper consultation with the national statistical offices. Countries were also complaining about the lack of transparency on how these estimates were prepared and disseminated by the international agencies in terms of which data sources had been used, which methodologies were behind the numbers. And finally, countries were complaining about the fact that international agencies were not making the best use of existing country official statistics. This was in 2006. Much has been done to address the issue of data discrepancies by both parties, by both national and international statisticians. I'm sharing with you the work of the UN Statistics Division to try to improve, address, and maybe trying to resolve the issue of data discrepancies. First of all, since 2008, UNSD has been busy inventorying the data discrepancies existing on a selected subgroup of MDGs indicators. Our work has been focusing on 20 indicators, and through workshops and ad hoc country visits, we have been able to compile the information for 40 countries. This is, of course, not a representative sample, so the results that I'm going to show you are just an indication of the magnitude of the data discrepancies between national and international data sets. Again, don't take it as a conclusion, but it can be leading, can give us some indication of where we stand. So for 40 countries, 20 indicators, we have a time window of 20 years, from 1990 to 2009. When we matched the two data sets, national and international, we came up with around 50% of inconsistencies. We also made a more in-depth research on the basis of a subgroup of these 40 countries, trying to understand the reasons for the discrepancies. And what we found is more or less what we expected. So the differences are listed in front of you. Countries and international agencies use different data sources in some instances, or use different definitions. Sometimes the methodologies is not the same. Sometimes it's the denominator in the indicators that is different. International agencies use the population division estimates. The country, of course, use their own population estimates. And the resulted number, the indicators, differ a lot in certain cases. But maybe we can think that the justification behind this, or the explanation behind this, could be that international agencies, when they receive the data from the country, they need to adjust the data to ensure international comparability. What was interesting is that through the study, we also confirmed that countries do not have the capacity to collect the data for specific indicators, and also that sometimes countries have the capacity, but the data are not compiled by the National Statistical Office, but they are rather available among other data producers within the National Statistical System, thus suggesting that if we manage to assist the countries in improving the way the data are shared within the National Statistical System, we could maybe be able to resolve some of the discrepancies. Also, we managed to confirm that countries have more data available within the National Statistical Offices than what the international agencies think. So, again, suggesting that if we manage to improve the way the data are transferred from the National Statistical Office, or the National Statistical System, we should say, towards the international statistical community, we would also be able to address and maybe resolve some of the discrepancies that we found. As I said, this was a study that UNSD started in 2008. On the basis of what we found, we decided to develop also an application. It's called MDG Labs. It's available online for the broad user community. There is no password. The user can navigate according to different, there are different features for the user. The one I'd like to point out is the screens where we compare side by side the national data sets for the 40 countries for which we have data, the national data sets side by side with the international data sets, so that the user can quickly spot, quickly identify any discrepancy, and we also provide some sort of explanation. This is another screenshot that I just prepared. This is the case of Cambodia, a specific indicator on the poverty indicator, and immediately, as you see, the user can identify where there are data gaps or data differences between the national and the international repositories. And we also provide some sort of explanation that has been discussed with both parties. So we have been communicating with both the National Statistical Office of Cambodia, in this case, and with the World Bank, given that we are talking about poverty. UNSD has been very much involved in other initiatives to address the issue of data discrepancies, of course, through workshops, focusing on data discrepancies, organized with international agencies and regional commissions under the work of the IAEG on MDGs indicators. So IAEG stands for Interagency and Expert Group on MDGs. This is the group of experts responsible for the monitoring of MDGs indicators at the global level. So UNSD, together with this group of specialized agencies and regional commissions, has been organizing since 2008 a series of regional workshops. We invite both national and international experts. They sit together, they come prepared with their data sets, and they go indicator by indicator, country by country, and they identify possible discrepancies, and they are there to also come up or agree on a possible plan of action to resolve the discrepancies. Countries have been very happy about these new settings, these new type of workshops, and we will keep organizing them. In terms of addressing the issue of transparency, again, UNSD, together with the international community, has been very much involved in improving the information that we provide in the MDG global website and database. It has been completely redesigned, and we provide extensive metadata for each of the indicators presented in the website. And in terms of addressing the issue of improving the use of existing official statistics at the country level, I would like to mention two initiatives. First of all, again, UNSD, together with the group of the IAEG experts, have been involved in adopting, adjusting the SDMX standards to the MDG indicators. And I can say that as of now, UNSD and selected agencies are already exchanging data and metadata using these new standards. And I would also point out that UNSD has undertaken two multi-year projects to improve data dissemination in selected countries. These projects are really focusing on improving the way the data are compiled and centralized at the country level, so improving data sharing mechanism within the data producers at the country level, within the national statistical system, and as a second step, to bring this data up to the international community. So improving the data reporting, the data transferring mechanism from the National Statistical Office to the international community. And for this, we have a vision. It's really our long-term approach to address the issue of discrepancies. We want to improve the accessibility and searchability of the existing data in your countries, and improve the way they are disseminated, communicated to the international level. So again, I'm mainly focusing on the two projects that we are implementing now. We are, as I said, centralizing the data at the country level, bringing them up using SDMX standards into UN Data. UN Data is the major online data service provided by UNSD. And we believe that by doing that, we will improve the visibility of country data within the international statistical community. The visibility of country official statistics will promote the use and understanding of national statistics. So to conclude, I'd like to say that we are working on Ian Castle's legacy. It's a work in progress, but UNSD is very much committed in keeping investigating, understanding, and reconciling data discrepancies between national and international data sets as much as possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Francesca. I think another example of how there's a footprint left on the international statistical work by Ian. And now I'd like to ask Eduardo Nunes, President of IBGE, to discuss another aspect of the work of Ian and the legacy that he's left.
Thank you, Brian. When I received this invitation made by Brian, I had the same question put by Giovannini. What kind of presentation I could make to present here if I didn't know at the time Ian Castle. And I had to study more about him. And I decided to choose one subject. And now I saw that the Giovannini presentation and Francesca are very complementary than mine. That I think Brian is a very good chair. And now I saw the presentation of Francesca, and some of my question is already put by her. And I'd like to stress some challenge that we know, but I'd like to remember the name of my presentation. Is also the relevance of Ian Castle for today, not only for the report for 1999, but many things put in that report is already in our concern. Francesca gave some example about MDG, and the choice made by Francesca was on Cambodia. And I take another country, is Bolivia, but to give the same example of how can we work together to improve data and to improve the link between official national statistics and international official statistics. And to do it, I use the Ian Castle ideas. And I'd like to put here, because our time is very short, two important messages. The first one is, in the case of Brazil, Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, our concern about some indicators used by international agents, not MDG, but HDI, and to give some contribution for the legacy of Ian Castle. And I took the report that Brazil, Morocco, and South Africa prepared for the next agenda, topic of the agenda this afternoon. And at that time, when we wrote this paper in October and beginning of November, the first evidence that the legacy of Ian Castle is already present today is this report. Why? Because, as you can see here, a number of issues already we can see in our discussion in our statistical commission. Even on the example given by Giovannini about the PPP, because when we look at the method used, for example, by UNDP to measure the new HDI, it's not the new HDI using PPP to measure GDP, but it's for measuring GNI. And for some countries, it's not the same. It's my case. If you compare the GDP and GNI of Brazil, we can see bigger difference. That's to say, one method was used for another issue. And maybe this is the fourth principle, that is, the misuse of the statistics. The method is there, but the way that they are using is not correct. We have to be not only transparent, but to have good quality of data. This is the first example. If we go to the South Africa presentation, in the paper, the part of the South Africa comments, we can see the same problem that Francesca showed here about the comparison on the same data for different sources. For the South Africa, we can see a small for someone, but a big difference between 26 and 9% of the same data. It's the use of one order will put the country in a bigger or small situation. This is very difficult for National Statistical Office explain if or not they follow the United States Nations Statistical recommendation. We have the fundamental principle we have to follow, but after that, it's not our data, it's another data used by other international organizations. The example put by Francesca here, it's a very interesting way to go forward. And we have what we can deal with this kind of issue. I repeat that Francesca put. We have to use, for example, the MDG labs project to make this kind of comparison. The example that I put was of Bolivia, not Cambodia. But it's the same case and the other data, not the data chosen by Francesca, but I put the data on unemployment. And you use different data for the same indicators. But here you can see we have the explanation about the difference. That's to say, in this case, we have two data, but we have also the explanation that for one source, the year of reference to measure unemployment is 10 years old. For another, is 15 years old. That's to say, we cannot have the same data. But now we understand the difference. And the point that for Brazil, we have to think more and take this opportunity to put for you. It's, again, the systematic use of non-official statistics to produce report about our country. This is very, very difficult, very, very political issue to explain inside our country how our data are not used by international organizations. And the second is even to explain why this happen, sometimes we cannot achieve this explanation because we have a lack of transparency about the use and the method. And the third problem is the lack of cooperation. That is the start point made by Francesca. For the first, the non-use of our official statistics put some problems at the international level and at the national level. Brazil, in the last almost 15 years, we had improved not only our method, not only our system of produce statistics, but inside our country, we create many ways to have more dialogue with the other producers and the users. Inside our country, we do it, even with the users and the other producers. We sit together to see what kind of data is better, what kind of method we have to produce, and how can we work together to have the same data. Sometimes the same data is not the best method, but is the comparable data. If we can do it in our country, I think we can do the same at the international level. If you see the example put here by Francesca with the MDG labs, it's a very good way to go to improve the international statistics. The problem of lack of transparency for Brazil, for Brazilian Institute of Statistics, it's very important to improve for the future our coordination or our way to talk together about the same subject. And one example that I put here is the way that UNDP used to measure multidimensional poverty index. It's a new example of the misuse of some data. And sometimes we don't know when and how this data will release it, how to be prepared, how to see the metadata, how to see if it will be our data if you don't know where and when this data will release it. And I'd like to agree add in your presentation to put even a calendar. We have to have a metadata, but even a calendar of all the data released by the statistical office and the international office. And the third, the lack of cooperation. For example, put this figure that we have here, a half glass of water. We can see in what part of this part of the glass are you, in the empty or full glass. This is the time, the moment that we are. We have to think for the future, and for the future, you need more cooperation. To have more cooperation, we have to use some software even already created like MDG labs. And if we now discussing Ian Castle contribution, I would say that after 12 years, after the report of Ian Castle, the same subject put by him in the past are and will be discussed this afternoon in this room. That's to say, it's a very good moment to think how can we take the good practice for the past to improve our practice for the present and to have for the future better statistics. The way that Francesca used to make for the MDG, I think could be a very good example to do the same for the other international indicator. So I'd like very much to Brian Pink to invite me to come to this session, to give this presentation, and even to understand more and better the Ian Castle contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I think that's a very passionate presentation around some of the challenges that Ian drew to the attention of some of the international statistical community back in the late 1990s. And as Eduardo said, I think this afternoon some of the same issues, unfortunately, will form part of the discussion. And I'd certainly think that the challenge that that Eduardo's put out, that surely 12 years down the track we can do better to start to resolve some of these problems rather than continue to discuss them, might be one of the legacies of the lunchtime presentation. But I'd like now to open the floor up if any other people have any comments that they'd like to make on any of the aspects of the different elements of the work that Ian helped us as an international statistical community start to address over quite a long period of his participation as part of the international statistical community. Don't see any. Rob?
Can you eventually react?
Rob Edwards, former ABS staff member who had the privilege of working with Ian, also former staff member of statistics at the IMF and now at the UN Statistics Division. And for me it's personally very pleasing that this seminar is being held today. One of the things that struck me about working with Ian when he was Australian statistician was the fact that he saw the job of a statistician as being very much associated with understanding what the public policy issues of the day were, and to then use his professional expertise as a statistician to figure out how statistics could be used to address the public policy issues. And for me, as someone who had the privilege of working with Ian, I think that was one of the strongest messages that he could give to young statisticians coming forward. It's not to politicise statistics at all, but rather to understand the public policy issues within which we can bring our professional judgments to bear as statisticians to inform those public policy issues. Thank you.
Yes, I think one of the things that, from our experience in the ABS when Ian joined us, he was perhaps ahead of his time. He didn't talk about evidence-based policy, but he certainly looked for and wanted data, good data, to inform good public policy. And I think, as Rob said, in all of the writings that I've seen of Ian's over the years, he was never an advocate. He let the data speak for itself. It was the analysis of the data and its ability to inform public policy that was one of the enormous strengths that he brought to his role as both a public policy person over a long period, but then combining that with his extraordinary abilities as a statistician and analyst. I don't see any other interventions.
Can we react a little?
Yeah, Enrico.
Thank you. I would like to build a little bit on what Rob Edwards just said on this connection to public policy issues. And in a sense, this is what links the three presentations today. We have to recognize that these policy needs evolve faster than what we are able really to cope with. And this is why, in my view, we should look at some discussions that maybe will take place in a few minutes as an attempt to cope with these fast-changing demand from policy needs. Eduardo was mentioning this multidimensional poverty issue, which is a serious issue, first of all, for policy, and second, for statisticians. But at international level, we never had a discussion on how to measure it. Serious discussion, I mean, with a lot of very nice experiences. And now I'm very happy that we will discuss how we can contribute to improve the UNDP work on that. Because they made a jump, and of course, now we can measure the distance between what the policy analysts are trying to do and what we can provide. And this is a way for us to speed up. So it's not that we are rediscussing now the same problems that were discussed at the time. We are discussing different issues, but unfortunately with the same challenges in a sense. And the second remark I would like to make here is just a comment as a question. I attended the first UNSC in 2001, and I saw some very lively discussions between experts in some fields about few issues. Now, thanks to the very good job done by UNSC, we have many more countries, and this is very good. But I have the impression that we tend to read what has been prepared at home to take positions on the various papers, and we lost some opportunity to discuss more in depth and to move forward. What I'm trying to argue is a question which is provocative. Could the very good discussion that took place on PPPs and so on, thanks to Jan, could be injected in the way in which UNSC works today? As I said, I think it's very good that we have so many countries, but we have to now also, with so many countries, with so many opportunities of contributing to the discussion, to have a more interactive discussion, let's say. This is just a suggestion in order to, maybe in a few minutes we will see how lively the discussions can be, but so, thank you.
Okay, I see a lot of people joining us now, in addition to those that have participated, but I'd like to thank all of the people who joined us for this seminar this afternoon. I think through the three presentations we've been able to understand how Ian has influenced the work of our international statistical community, and as both Eduardo, Francesca and Enrico have clearly demonstrated, that influence is ongoing, and I'm sure will continue. The other thing that I think that Enrico mentioned, which is perhaps something that we as statisticians, senior statisticians, should be thinking about, is how we can encourage and help our younger statisticians build that sort of curiosity, that sort of ability to cast the spotlight on areas where perhaps the methodologies, the data are not as robust as they should be, and consistent with Principle 4 of the fundamental principles, feel confident to be able to criticise and draw attention to the limitations and the problems that are there. I think sometimes we don't necessarily have the courage to do that. And so on behalf of the ABS, we'd like to thank the UNSD for facilitating this seminar today, and we hope that it's been of value to everybody who's participated. So could you join me in thanking our three presenters, Enrico Giovannini, Francesco Grum and Eduardo Nunes. Thank you.